welcome. Thank you for tuning into the School Board Patriot podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Mandert. Today, we'll be discussing the school board meeting that happened this May 17th, and I'll be discussing the referendum again, this time with a wonderful community members, Jim Stanley, who is very well educated and very informative. Our interview was great, and I hope you guys enjoy it. But for now, I wanted to go over the school board meeting that I had attended this past Tuesday. In the beginning of the board meeting, we were actually waiting outside for an hour and a half because they were having a ceremony of some sort. So that was fun. But when we finally got to go inside, I'll be going over the public comments on agenda items. First was Beverly Ledbetter. She had thanked Browning for allowing peaceful assembly for students in schools, and she wanted to know the whole zero tolerance and fighting that Mr. Browning had implemented, and wanted to know the difference between that and the zero tolerance policy from the state. After that, Chelsea Starr had stated her concerns on the student dress code. I had attended the student code of conduct workshop where they were discussing the changes. And one of the changes that was provided was that dress code was now going to be at the principal's discretion, and the principal and teacher's discretion. The problem with that, as Chelsea had stated, was that it leaves it very open to interpretation, which can be a cause for conflict. One of the problems that Chelsea had was on the student code of conduct on page 14, it had stated that if the school has any suspicion on a student breaking the student code of conduct, that they can question them without the parents' consent or without the parents being present, which is huge deal. And I don't understand why that is in there. It goes away from the child's rights, the parents' rights. So on the student code of conduct, it states if the school has reasonable suspicion on a student breaking student code of conduct. It's a very vague statement, and the fact that the school can question the student without the parents being present or without contacting the parents first is just ridiculous. Another statement that Chelsea had made is if the student decides to stay quiet and not say a thing, would they get in trouble for it? Do they have the option of having to call their parents? Those are all viable questions. Next was Craig Smith, who also had the same question for the student code of conduct. Students being questioned without their parents present or without the contact of their parents first leaves a door wide open for children to be manipulated. Teachers and principals and the school staff are all human. It just leaves it open for anybody to manipulate a student if that they don't like, or they're having a bad day, and they can make the student say whatever they want. And if there is reasonable suspicion on the student breaking the student code of conduct, that parents should be contacted first. He also stated that if this were to happen, the scenario where the teacher, principal, staff member questions the student in a way that they manipulate the student into putting themselves guilty, it could jeopardize that student's future. Aren't we gearing our schools towards first-class education? And without a doubt, the parents should be included in all aspects of the student's life. And that also includes if they were in trouble. After Craig Smith was Lisa Spencer Novak. Her comment was on 13.1 with the allocation of funds. She claims she's a teacher at James Marlowe Elementary, a music teacher, and has noticed that there has been a reduction in music programs, and this is a STEAM school. She wanted to know why the music program has been reduced to 3 days a week, and feels that she cannot fulfill the promise providing a world-class education. She stated, if you remove this or reduce the music arts from the school, it breaks the trust in the parents for the STEAM schools themselves, which I totally agree on. This is very important. I also want to make note, towards the end of this meeting, Browning had made it known that what Mrs. Novak wasn't entirely true. I don't know why he stated that. I'm sure it's because he doesn't like his schools to look bad. All right, another part during the meeting that I wanted to bring up under the United School Employees of Pasco, it was stated that 72% of employees leave, and they are usually 0 to 5 year employees. The change of the start times have not improved anything. Surprise. And it seems as though we can't get enough qualified teachers, and we have lowered in morale and performance. That is not news to me because we've been saying this for a year now. Another thing that was stated that I think is important to note is that they had mentioned the bus routes. We started off with 420 routes. In the second semester, we ended up with 367 routes, and now we are at 353. They are trying their best to eliminate the 10-10 start times for schools as much as possible. And we're still at a driver shortage. We're down 22 drivers. And that's if they stay. All right, so this meeting was very uninformative. A lot of the information they provided is things that we have already stated, such as the bus shortages and the school times. I'm going to jump forward to public comment at the end, the part where that is not recorded. A lot of the things that were stated was about retention, keeping employees because of the referendum. Pat Rogers had mentioned again that Chasco Middle still does not have any lights, that next year that students will be walking to school when Browning and the board decided to remove the bus routes that are 1 to 2 miles close to the schools. And that is very dangerous for children to be walking when there is no flashing lights, no speed limit reduction in that area. Speaking on teachers and how things are being spent in the county, Kathy went up and stated that Kathy came across a friend of hers who is a teacher here in Pasco County. She had told Kathy that she had been in the school district for 8 years without a raise, that new teachers are making more than the veteran teachers. Also, that one of the administrators on the board, and more specifically Ray Gadd, had a $10,000 raise in just a year. She told the board to look at their spending before taxing the public, reminding them that taxes are already increasing. There are also certain employees, more specifically nurses that are classified as instructional, who are making $69,000 a year. If we were to pass this referendum, those instructional employees would also benefit from this referendum, even though they're not underpaid. After Kathy, Natalie had asked why public comments are at the end and unimportant as to the reason that it's not recorded. She feels that the community is ignored and that we should have a full audit for inefficiency. And it's not to say, she stated that she doesn't believe that anyone's stuffing their pockets. There are audits that provide companies to see where they can be more efficient. That's it for now. I'm going to show you guys an interview that I had with Jim Stanley. He is excellent at explaining what exactly is happening with the referendum, why it is not the best solution for paying the teachers more, and just check it out. All right, guys, we're here talking with Jim Stanley. We're going to go over some of the things about the referendum that's going to be on the ballot in August. He has quite a lot of good information and things that we should know as a community member. Go ahead, Jim.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you. So one of the things that we've been talking about a great deal lately is the upcoming referendum on the property tax increase that the school district is proposing as a mechanism, they say, for increasing the salaries of non-administrative personnel, which is really a broad way of saying anyone but administrators. I don't think anyone's making an argument from our side that teachers don't deserve to make more. It's pretty clear there's a disparity in what teachers are paid here in Pasco County versus what they're paid in some of the surrounding counties. And when you're competing for that talent, we need to be competitive. So we have no disagreement there. The question is whether they need a tax increase to do it. The tax increase they're proposing is a 1 mil increase in our property tax, which they say if they go that full amount will raise about $37 million per year. Couple of things about that. Number one, their entire budget is 1.47 billion. Their operating budget, which they always point to as that's the only place you can use to pay salaries, is about half that. It's about 750 million. You're talking about less than 5 or 6% of their operating budget, or 2.5% of their total budget. If they can't find $37 million in out of 750 million to pay teachers who they say are their top priority, then there's a problem. So the question really just comes down to, are they making good choices with the resources they have? And that's where I have a real disagreement with them.
Yes, I agree. And I know that I had asked some of the board members about it, mainly Megan, and she stated that because I recommended doing an audit, but she claims that they do an audit every 3 years and they're currently going through an audit right now. But from my understanding, from what I've come to know, is the audit really doesn't tell them how to spend the money, it just tells them that they're following the laws.
You're exactly right. So they are subjected to an audit at least every couple of years. In fact, I know that there's an accountant's opinion on the financial statements they produce every year. And as you say, you're exactly right. It's just designed to make sure that expenses are properly recorded, that the fund balances are properly presented. It's basically just saying that the information is accurate. It's not saying that they're doing things well, that they're spending wisely, that they're being efficient. So again, it's another example of a red herring or a straw man argument that the district makes. Yes, they're subject to an audit. Nobody has said that they're stuffing bags of cash into their pockets. What we're saying is they're just being very irresponsible with the money that they are given.
Yes, and if those who are watching don't believe me, I will provide a link with the documentation where it states that the auditor considers, and I'll quote, internal control relevant to the entity's preparation and fair presentation of the financial statements in order to design audit procedures that are appropriate in the circumstances, but do not for the purpose of expressing an opinion on the effectiveness of the entity's internal control. Just, I'm going to link that so those watching know where to find it.
I love it. That's exactly the point that we need to keep pushing back on.
Exactly. Is there any examples of wasteful spending that you've noticed?
Yeah, let me give you two in particular. So one is in administrative expenses. The district, again, this is an example of where they point to look over here instead of at numbers that we would rather talk about. And one of the examples they give is that their administrative expenses are below the state average. Well, so what? Mm-hmm. What's more important is, how has that been trending over time? And so the comprehensive annual financial report that they provide on an annual basis has a table in it, and it shows for the last 10 years the growth in instructional employees and administrative employees over that 10-year period. And the number of students in district-run schools during that period increased less than 9%. It's about 8.6%. The number of teachers increased by about 13%. Mm-hmm. The number of administrators increased 34%.
Yeah.
So you have 3 or 4 times the number of administrators growing as opposed to the number of students. So that's one point. The other thing too, since we're on the subject of the number of students, there is a massive amount of unused capacity in district schools. And part of that is a fact that they just keep building new schools to accommodate growth in areas that are growing, mm-hmm. without regard to the fact that there are other parts of the county that are in fact shrinking. It may surprise you, and I'm sure it'll surprise a lot of the folks who are listening to your podcast. that elementary schools in Pasco County in the last 5 years have actually shrunk by over 2,000 students.
Wow.
There are fewer students in Pasco County elementary schools today than there were 5 years ago.
Wow.
When you look around at all the growth that we've seen over the last 5 years, I'm sure that that's stunning to a lot of people. So you might say, well, where are those kids going? A lot of them have chosen charter schools. Charter schools have grown almost 400% in that period of time. People are voting with their feet. And so you have schools, and I'm going to give you one example. Lacucci Elementary, which the district specifically was given an opportunity to consider closing, the school board did, and refused.
Mm-hmm.
That school is at less than 50% capacity. There's about 281 students in that school. It's surrounded by 4 other elementary schools that are also below capacity, somewhere between, I think, 67 and 75% roughly. There is more than enough room to close at least 1, possibly 2 of those schools and absorb that. Those are in parts of the county that are not growing. But it costs about almost $8,500 per student to educate a student at Lacucci Elementary because it's half empty, versus the most overcrowded elementary school, which is Oakstead. That's at about 135% capacity right now, has over 1,000 students in it. It costs about $5,000 per student to educate a student there. So they refuse to close a school because of political reasons, when the finances don't justify it. So when the district says we don't have money, what they really mean to say is we don't want to make cuts anywhere else in the budget because it will either be unpopular or we just simply don't want to. It doesn't mean the money's not there. Budgets are all about choice. And if you say the teachers are the first priority, pay them first. Figure out what it takes to pay to attract and retain quality teachers, and then figure out what you can afford to do with what's left over. And if there are things that the board in its wisdom believes that we as parents and taxpayers want to support, whether it's sports, whether it's arts, whether it's half-empty schools, put that on the ballot. Don't put teachers' salaries on the ballot. And by the way, they're only putting this on the ballot for 4 years. And you know what happens at the end of 4 years? There's a line item in their paychecks. This actually the district has confirmed. There's a line item in their paychecks that this salary adjustment will last only as long as this tax lasts. So at the end of 4 years, even if it is approved, if it's not reapproved in 4 years, that salary is taken away.
Yep.
How can you do that to teachers? How can you tell them, well, we're going to give you a raise, but we're not going to guarantee that you're going to stay at this level. 4 years from now, we may cut you.
Exactly.
I mean, that's irresponsible budgeting.
It is. And not to mention, what if it doesn't even get passed? What if they end up losing the vote? Like, what are they going to do then?
And frankly, I think we should find out. I think what we should do is say, no, we're not going to give you any more money until you, as a district, make better spending choices. Consider closing some of these undercapacity schools, reduce administrative overhead. Some of the other expenses that I think are very questionable are what I would call faddish training and development programs, where they send teachers to learn the latest teaching methods. Teachers know how to teach.
Exactly.
You don't need to spend a lot of time and money re-educating them every year or two on whatever the latest fad is. Remember a few years ago, Common Core was the big thing. We spent a whole bunch of money and it was stupid. Yep. The process that kids were being asked to figure out what 2 times 2 equals was, totally Byzantine. Teachers know how to teach. We don't need to keep on sending them to these ridiculous training and development programs, many of which, by the way, have absolutely nothing to do with education. Absolutely. Some of them have everything to do with social and political indoctrination. Yep. And that's another conversation we could have about some of the district's priorities. But that's another example of where they need to make some serious choices about what's truly important. Their first and foremost priority is the education of children, preparing them to be productive, intelligent citizens and taxpayers and workers, and preparing them for college if that's their journey. A lot of the things that they do have nothing to do with any of that. And they need to stop putting that first and put teachers first.
Absolutely. Yeah, completely agree. And I have had other episodes where I spoke on the conferences that the teachers were sent out. I covered that. I could talk for hours about that.
I know I didn't want to go down that rabbit hole, but I did at least want to make an homage to the fact I know you've brought that up, and others have as well. There's a lot of mischief in a $1.5 billion budget. And frankly, none of the people that are on our current school board are the type of people who have the skills to go through those budgets line item by line item, looking for ways to save.
Yep.
You have some people who have the best of intentions, but they're just not equipped to do that. The other problem is they don't come at it from the perspective of skepticism. And that's, I think, an important quality for a member of the school board, is to be skeptical, ask hard questions of the staff, and don't just take whatever answer they give you as a given. Investigate it for yourself, see if what they're telling you is true. Unfortunately, they don't do that. If you look at the districts, they publish their proposed and approved budgets, and they are always identical.
Mm-hmm.
They never make a single change based on review with the board. That tells you that the board is simply rubber stamping whatever the district is asking. They're not really taking a deep dive into it and looking to see, are there things we could do that would save money? But even when they are given the chance to do that, and I use the Lacucci school as an example, they were specifically given the opportunity to vote on closing that school, and they refused, even though there are literally 5 elementary schools within a 15-mile radius that are all under capacity, and they're all shrinking. So that's just irresponsible.
Yes.
If they want to make the case that that's more important than paying teachers, well, then make that case. But you can't say that's more important than paying teachers and also at the same time say teachers are our highest priority.
Exactly. And speaking of irresponsibility, do you remember back in April that article that came up about some employees were going to be seeing smaller checks after tax? There was a tax withholding mix-up. Do you know anything on that? Is that like related, or?
I remember seeing that article, and I remember that the district explained it as some kind of an accounting or clerical error.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know much more than that. I didn't look into it deeply, but I'm not surprised. I mean, the people they have running the district are not, frankly, the sharpest tools in the shed.
I agree. So that being said, I hope, I would just want to thank you so much for providing all that information. I know we can speak more on it, but my podcast is only 20 minutes long, so I don't have that much time. But yes, thank you so much for all the information. Is there anything else you want to say before I let you go?
I would just reiterate again, we want to pay teachers, but let's find the money in the budget without going for a tax increase. Let's make them make the hard choices.
Yes.
And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Take care.
Bye.